Yesterday, I made a video as to why Canadians cannot elect who their senators will be. And I noted how American historians typically don't like that fact. I don't know why. They just want the 17th Amendment repealed. But we're going to look into why. Not because why the American historians don't really like the Senate, but why they are allowed to vote in the first place. Well, let's actually look at how or why it used to be the way that Americans could not elect their senator. Well, when the Constitution was being created, the Founding Fathers intentionally made the Senate an undemocratic office. The Founding Fathers wanted the Senate to contrast with the House. They argued that the Senate is appointed by state legislators, so it's kind of an elected office. However, not everyone was happy with an unelected Senate. Some argued that there was legislative corruption and electoral deadlock. Between 1857 and 1900, the Senate was investigated 3 times in cases of corruption. Well, how would there be any deadlock? Wouldn't a solidly red state full of solidly red voters vote for a solidly red House and Senate? Would appoint a solidly red senator? Well, no, not necessarily. Voters didn't vote back then the same way that they vote today. Today they would just vote for the Republican or the Democratic Party. But back then, voters actually voted for who they thought was the better candidate. Deadlock was such a huge issue that states couldn't even appoint their own senators because the House and Senate were too divided. This led to states losing representation in the body. In the 9 years period between 1891 and 1900, 46 deadlock elections were held to decide deadlocked Senate races. In 1906, William Randolph opened up a conversation for electing senators, calling the senators treasonous. The House of Representatives had previously voted for this amendment 4 times. In 1893, 1900, 1904, and 1908, they voted for it with the necessary 2/3, but each time it died in the Senate. By 1910, 36 state legislators were needed to pass this amendment, and 31 had voted in favor of the amendment. That same year in 1910, 10 Republican senators were forced out of their office for being corrupt. And by 1913, the 17th Amendment was passed, making it law for senators to be elected directly by the people on election night. One of the main opposition to the bill, Elihu Root, had felt so strongly that senators should be appointed by state legislators that he refused to run for re-election when his term ended. And there you go. That's why Americans have the luxury of electing their senators, and they just want it repealed. Interesting though, if we took a look at how long it took for Americans to get Senate elections and apply it to Canadian history, we should have had Senate elections in 1991. All of that gave me a headache. I'm just gonna go to bed. I am John Johnson, and I'm running for Prime Minister of Canada. If you elect me, I will make the Senate an elected office.